You're listening to the Outsider Sisters podcast series. This podcast exists to amplify the voices and tell the experiences of women and non-binary persons of colour who grew up or migrated to the UK. Outsider Sisters gives you an uncomfortable snapshot into the everyday shared life experiences of many people of colour living on this small island. In this episode, I speak to activist and Professor of Tourism, Donna Chambers.
My name is Donna Chambers, and I am a Professor of Tourism at the University of Sunderland. Also the convener of a race, class and ethnicity research network. Yeah.
Could you tell me more about the network that you're involved in?
Right. So the network, it's a research network, and I actually started it in March 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I started it because I was concerned about the sort of what I thought was the silencing of issues to do with race and racism, particularly within the university context. I was concerned about issues to do with whiteness and white privilege, and also concerned with the sort of constant disadvantage, put it that way, that seemed to be happening with the sort of Black and Asian communities within the UK. And I thought that it would be good to bring together a number of different researchers from across the university into this network, because there wasn't a research network that existed in the university that had to do with race, class, and ethnicity. It was one of the interdisciplinary networks that the university was supporting, because they were encouraging us to work across faculties. And I thought that, well, race, class, and ethnicity was a good thing to do that kind of spanned different subject areas and different disciplines. So that was why I put the network together, not only to do research, but also to be involved in activism as well, to sort of have a public engagement as well. So that was why I started the network. And we've had a number of events since last year. And I just actually finished a survey that we did with our BAME students around their experiences at Sunderland.
Okay.
So I just finished that report last week, so I'm glad it's done.
And what were sort of the outcomes of that? Or do you know yet?
Yeah, so I was actually doing several presentations on some excerpts from the report. Both I've done presentations to the Students' Union at Sunderland. I've done presentations to our equality and diversity group at the university. I've done presentation to Sunderland Unites, which is a community organization that lobbies in terms of anti-racism. So what I was doing with that survey was there were different aspects to the survey. I wanted to understand what students' experiences were with the support and academic services at the university, but I also wanted to find out whether the students had experiences of racism or discrimination on campus as well as off campus. So it was very interesting because it was a kind of comparison between Sunderland campus and London campus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and while most of the students actually said that they hadn't experienced racism or discrimination on campus, most of the Sunderland students actually said that they had experienced racism and discrimination off campus in the Sunderland community.
That does not surprise me.
Well, it's not surprising, but I thought what was really interesting was that we had some of the questions, even though it was a survey, some of the questions were open, so students could just write in what they wanted to write in there. And there were some really interesting things that the students wrote in, which is, some of it was quite disturbing, to be honest. So now what I'm hoping that from this report, because I've sent it on to the powers that be at the university, and I'm hoping that we will be able to kind of sit down and, because I made 9 recommendations coming out of the report. And I'm hoping that, we can sit down and actually see how we can actually implement some of these through discussion with the Students' Union, with the university, so that we can, really make sure that our students never have to have these comments ever again.
In regards to your lecturing work on tourism, do you find that feeds into what you do in terms of like talking about race and things like that, or are they very separate?
No, it does actually feed in, because what I do in tourism is that I look at how people and places are represented. So part of what I look at is, for example, how do we represent Black people in tourism, like promotional material, or what is it that is missing in tourism promotional material? Because when I did my PhD, what I was looking at was representations of England in tourism material. And I was looking to see what were the representations that were there and what was included and what was excluded. So I was looking to see whether, and I finished my PhD how many years ago now? From 2003. I finished my PhD in 2003. And even from then, what I was looking at is how the Britain's colonial past was actually represented in its tourism promotional material. So that's actually what I started out doing for my PhD. And I've continued looking at issues to do with post-colonialism and decolonization within the context of tourism. Because a lot of the countries that are very dependent on tourism are Caribbean countries, countries that are in Asia, and so on. So obviously there's a colonial connection there. So much of the work that I do looks at that kind of colonial connection or post-colonial connection. So it very much, it integrates with the tourism work that I do.
And I know you've been a lecturer for quite a long time now. But as I sent to you, that like fewer than 1% of university professors are Black, and male professors continue to outnumber females by 3 to 1. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed the lack of Black women in education?
Yes, of course. I don't know who wouldn't have noticed that.
Probably a lot of men wouldn't have noticed that or bothered to care about that.
Well, yeah, there's, and I think, when you talk about BAME as well, there's differences within the BAME community, because you have more sort of South Asian or Asian, women in at professorial level, put it that way, than you do actually women who are from Black or African, from African or Caribbean heritages. So that is where you find the smallest numbers. BAME women are small, obviously, but when you kind of drill down in the BAME numbers as well, I think it's women who are of Black African and Black Caribbean heritage that are the least represented within, say, at professorial level or at the higher levels within. But all BAME women are underrepresented. I think that the word Black has often been used more as a political statement, and it's about sort of really Black was being used to mean not white. And I think when you look at things like where Black British feminism came in, is where they were saying what brings us together is our kind of colonial history, because most people from India, from Pakistan, Bangladesh, all of these South Asian countries, along with African countries, Caribbean countries, had had experiences of colonialism. So, and we were the sort of oppressed in the society. So I think that Black was used more as a political statement to mean not white. Rather than drilling down to see, are you sort of Asian? Are you, from Thailand? Are you from wherever? So I think that was done in order to add strength to the movement rather than fragment the movement. But I think that now there's been a lot of discussion around the categorization of BAME, because obviously there are different experiences within, that categorization. No, there are different ways that people see it. Some people think that we should all be together so that we don't fragment the movement, because we have strength in being bigger rather than smaller. And then some people feel that kind of obscures the different experiences that people have. So, I think it's quite a complex issue.
It is, isn't it? It's complex. And I mean, I've read a book called Slaying Your Lane, and they talk about Black, it's focused on Black women. And it focuses on terms of that a Black Caribbean person from island to island will have a very different experience of a Black African person from country to country in Africa. And also in academia, Black African children tend to do better than Black Caribbean children. But at school, we are lumped into one again. It's almost like by putting us all together, it doesn't allow for differences in culture. So it is a really hard one to address. Do we come together, or do we have to sort of admit that there are differences? Because it's like, from island to island, there are islands that don't like each other very much. There's.
I don't understand.
No,
that
I don't.
myself,
I don't either, to be honest. I know that. My family are like, from yours, they're all like, what's your heritage again? Jamaican. That's it. Yeah. So I remember my family, like from the Caribbean, were like St. Kitts, and it was always a case of like, Jamaicans called us a lot of like small islanders, and it seemed to be this kind of arrogance. But then it was like people from my island didn't like people from Jamaica. So then, if you got called Jamaican, you were like so offended. So it was almost this sort of internal hate within our own community. But again, I guess that stems from colonialism as well.
Yeah, but I think also, it's this kind of big small thing, because it goes all the way back to the federation that they tried to put together after the end of, at the end of colonialism, when all the countries were becoming independent in the sort of late 50s, early 60s. And they wanted to have a federation of the Caribbean countries because we were way too small to try to be independent on our own. And then when they tried to put the federation together, Jamaica decided that they didn't want to be part of the federation. And then they said, well, if Jamaica pulls out of it, which is Jamaica is the biggest English-speaking country in the Caribbean. And they said, well, if Jamaica is not going to be in, then it's going to collapse. And it did collapse. So it never worked. But, the Eastern Caribbean states still have a bit of a collaboration going on. So I think it's that kind of tension that exists. And Jamaicans are always seen as, I don't know, by the other islanders as quite aggressive and quite,
arrogant. That's the thing that I remember my family talking about, arrogant Jamaicans.
Exactly. Yeah. But
it's really diversive.
It is.
It's a shame.
But it's a shame, and I don't understand it, because I love the Caribbean. I've been to many of the islands, I really, really don't understand why we should be, I don't get that, to be honest. And I know a lot of people don't get it either. So I don't think we should be,
No, we shouldn't. I was fed that as a young child about like almost like hate for Jamaicans, and it's really sad. Like it wasn't necessarily from my mom as such, but it was like, you don't talk to someone who's Jamaican, you don't like marry a Jamaican person. It was quite intense, really. It was almost as if they weren't seen as part of the Caribbean. It was like they were left on their own. And, you saying about in the Federation and that kind of thing, that makes more sense to me now.
Yeah.
But without knowing that history, I wasn't really aware of that. But it was interesting to see people feeding young children that kind of rhetoric that you don't even like your own.
It's a shame, but I think distance is part of it as well, because Jamaica is a little bit of a distance away from the Eastern Caribbean countries. Because you're all on that sort of archipelago, this whole range of islands on that eastern side of the Caribbean there. With Antigua, St. Kitts, Nevis, all of those, Dominica. All of those are on that side, whereas Jamaica is on the other side. So I think the distance and the fact that there hasn't been this kind of, it's only in the past, maybe decade or so, that there was even links between them in terms of plane. You couldn't take a plane direct from Jamaica to go to, say, Barbados or somewhere like that. You had to stop over in Antigua, or I've been to the Caribbean and I have to go through Puerto Rico and all of these things. So that kind of linking and exchange amongst the islands was also made understanding quite difficult.
Hello everybody, welcome. It's so lovely to see the support, the solidarity with Black Lives Matter. My name is Donna Chambers, and I just want to open this rally, and I'm really, really happy to be here. Are you hearing me at the back?
I didn't plan to stay in the UK. I just came to study.
And then never left.
Yeah, and then just one thing led to the other, and then I realized, oh my God, I'm still here.
What were your experiences of that? Was it a bit of an eye-opener, a bit of like a shock?
Actually, this is really interesting, because in Jamaica, we always saw Britain as not very advanced.
Mum says that about Grenada as well, like where she came from, Trinidad actually, and she said that she was so much more educated and advanced when she got here.
We always never saw Britain as being very advanced. I think because we were always looking more to America. So a lot of the things that were happening in Jamaica were geared towards the States and geared because of the proximity to the States, because really you could have breakfast in Miami and have lunch in Jamaica. This is how close we are to Miami. So, that southern part of the States. So I think a lot of the influences that came into Jamaica, after colonialism, where a lot of Americanisms came into the island. So we always used to see Britain as kind of not that as advanced as the States. So whenever we would say things like, oh, this song is number one in the UK, and we would listen to it and say, oh, the only place that could be number one is in the UK because it's rubbish. We used to say the only place that song could be number one is in the UK. Ow, ow, ow. And we used to laugh, and we used to laugh at the clothes and look at that English shoes. And, so we never really thought about it in terms of this kind of, we knew it was advanced, but we just weren't impressed. We weren't that impressed. And that could have been because of the colonial thing. It could be that, a kind of unconscious rebellion against the whole colonialism. I don't know, but we just never had England, especially England. We didn't really talk about Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. It was mostly England, yeah? We never thought about England as being this kind of, oh, we're so impressed. And I remember the first time I came to the UK, I was on the train and I was looking at the buildings and I thought, oh my God, they look old and broken down, because you're not used to people being so happy to live in old buildings and,
with mold everywhere.
Yeah, and I just looked at it and it was grey, and the buildings looked grey. Everything just looked grey. And I thought, oh no, what's this? So it's just quite strange. Yeah, that was my first impression of when I came to England, because I came to England first and I was like, oh my God, this place is grey and dull.
Now you live in the northeast where it's grey and dull.
Yeah. I was in Scotland before. I lived in Scotland for about 5 years. So yeah, it's interesting.
Did you find that you had sort of negative experiences of microaggressions and covert or overt racism when you got here, especially sort of in your profession? I can't really honestly say that I experienced anything that was overt. I haven't experienced anything overt, nobody called me names or... Really?
I've never had anybody calling me any sorts of names but you know that I think it's more covert. I think a lot of people would say that it's covert. I keep saying to people, even whenever I'm at university, even though I'm a professor, when people look at me, they think I'm a student still. They never think that I'm a professor, Even everybody who would see me, they think I'm a student. Oh, what are you studying? Like, I'm not studying. I'm actually a lecturer there, and you could see their faces change, when you tell them. Whereas if you tell them that you're a professor, it's like they can't believe it. And I just think, really?
Has anyone actually outwardly said, I don't wow, or oh, can't believe it? Have you ever had any sort of really memorable, I guess, experiences of that?
They never said, wow, you're a professor. Well, actually, this guy that lives across the road from me, he's, I think, Bangladeshi. And I've been living in this house for 6 years now. And I think about a year ago, we usually say hello to each other, but no long conversation. And the other day, I don't know what it was, he saw me parking somewhere and I had to walk back to my car and he back to my house. And he saw me and he started to chat with me. And he said, oh, are you at the university? And I said, yes. And he said, what are you studying? And I said, I'm not a student. I'm actually a professor. And he was like, wow, you're a professor? And he's looking at me up and down. That means you're bright. And, sounding shocked. And I was like, ha, 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 ha. Yeah.
Jeez.
So it was like, really? And actually the other day, I think it was last year, and this really upset me. This one upset me. I bought this pair of shoes from Clark's. And, I bought it and I thought, oh, I don't like these shoes anymore. It doesn't really fit right. And I'm just going to give it away to a charity shop in Sunderland. So I took the shoes to this charity shop in Sunderland and I went to the person who was at the cashier area. And I say, do you take shoes here? And she was like, oh, we don't buy shoes. I'm like, what? Said, buy shoes? Why would you think I'm here to sell shoes? Isn't this a charity shop? I'm here to give you shoes. So, just looked at me, saw a black person and thought, okay, I'm here to sell shoes because I need the money. I think sometimes I feel, maybe this is more the woman part coming up, you feel quite objectified when I go I don't go into a lot of pubs or anything, because if I go in there, everybody just looks at me, it's like you're some kind of strange person from another planet.
And you feel it, you can tell, can't you?
Yeah. You see them looking, you see them stop. It's so obvious. They stop and they turn and they look. I try to think, oh, it's because I'm beautiful. I kind of say it kind of facetiously, yeah, it's because I'm beautiful. That's why they're looking. But obviously that's not it. And, even recently I was going to meet a couple of Greek friends of mine what's the pub called? The Peacock.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Okay. Well, do you know where Keele Square is in Sunderland?
I don't know Sunderland that well, to be honest. I go uni there, but that's kind of it.
Okay, anyway, so there's this pub that they in this area of the city that they're trying to regenerate. And I was supposed to meet my friends there because it was one of them birthday or something. And as soon as I walked into that pub, unfortunately, it was just as Sunderland was supposed to play football or something, so the pub was quite crowded, unfortunately. And as soon as I walked in there, every single person turned around and looked at me. And my friends couldn't believe it because this is the first time they've ever seen that, and I said to them, did you see them looking? Because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't imagining it. And they said, honestly, we've never seen anything like that. Why were they looking at you like this? I said, really? Well, okay.
Wow.
It was, and this is just normal. You just go into places and people just stare. It's really strange.
I had a friend, I have a friend, and we went to a festival once, and we got stopped by the police on the way in because they were like drugs searching and stuff. Mm-hmm. And she said, that's never happened to me before. And it was sort of her proper first experience of what it's like to be around like a black person.
Yeah.
And you could she was terrified. And I don't think she could really believe that's sort of like my everyday worry. And I said to her, as we were driving, I said, they'll stop us. Out of all the cars, they will stop us. Mm. And yeah, it was just such an experience, but I knew it would happen. Just knew. As soon as I see a checkpoint at a festival, I'm really surprised when I don't get stopped.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because you just expect it.
You do, and there was no reason for it. Now, all these cars went through, but it was our car that got stopped.
Yeah.
It's usually either me or like young white boys or black boys. Yeah. But it'll always be the black person or the young person.
Stopped. Yeah. I've had experiences traveling with my white colleagues already, and I get stopped and they go through.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you been stopped before then?
Yeah, at airports. Yeah, like I've traveled with.
Yes.
I was going it was a work trip to France with my white colleagues. Not from Sunderland Uni, when I was working at another uni, and we were going to France to start some new program or something in a university in France, which we had a collaborative agreement with. And when I went to the airport, Gatwick, I think it was Gatwick or Heathrow, I can't remember which one it was. And, they just passed through coming back when we're coming back. They just passed through and I was stopped. And they were on the other side looking at me, wondering what was going on. And I was like, you just go ahead, you go and leave me. Honestly, it happened to me more than once. I remember when I just came to the UK, actually, and I was a student. And, student, you're always looking for work. Just to supplement, even though I did have a scholarship, but I still wanted to save money, and the scholarship wouldn't allow me to save money. It was just enough to live on, and I just wanted to save money, so I was always looking for work. And we used to sign up with these agencies. I think it was Adecco at the time.
Oh yeah, Adecco.
So I signed up with Adecco to see, whether. So when I was going to fill out the forms in Adecco, and the woman looked at me and said, "Oh, your English is very good. Where are you from?" And I said, Jamaica. And she said, yeah, your English is really good. What language do they speak in Jamaica? I was like, really? So I said to her, we speak English? Swahili. No, I told her we speak Swahili. And she didn't even blink. She didn't even blink.
Lord.
something about Black Lives Matter. We all know where it started. It started actually from 2013 in the United States, and it was really because of the killing of yet another black man. This time it wasn't from the police, but it was from a vigilante. We all know Trayvon Martin was only 17 years old when he was gunned down by a vigilante. And people just decided enough was enough. And that's when
because in Jamaica, there's a different sort of thing happening, and I think it's similar in the rest of the Caribbean as well. There is the thing that we call colorism or shadism.
Yes,
that's
colorism.
What you're affected by in Jamaica, because the lighter skinned you are, the more you're seen as beautiful and this sort of thing. So tiring. But but here, as they say in the States, is a one-drop rule, right? It's kind of the one-drop rule, the one-drop thing, where even if you have one drop of black blood, you're black.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. That's what I say, I always say you'll always be seen as black. As soon as you have a little colour in you, you're seen as black.
Yeah. So here, it's quite different because the shadism doesn't really come into play, like everybody's black here. Whereas in Jamaica, there is this kind of shadism going on, because, they call you the brown skin one, So they call kind of lighter skin people browning when they're talking about women. The browning down the road, man.
Do they really do that?
Yeah, the browning. Yeah, that means a light skinned person. Usually used to refer to women, obviously. I remember when, do you know Buju Banton?
Of course, I know Buju Banton, yes.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time in the Caribbean and he was so popular.
Buju came out with this song, man. Oh my God, Buju came out with this song. Me love me car, me love my bike, me love my money and ting. But
so what was it called? Say that again.
Oh my God.
Say that again. What did it say? Say that again. What did it say?
He said, me love me car, me love me bike, me love me money and ting. But most of all, me love me browning.
You're light skinned.
Right? Yeah. And I tell you, when he came out with that song, it was people were kicking off like nobody's business, saying, "Really? What?" And people started kicking off. And then Buju came back with this other song saying, black woman, in order to make reparations.
Oh, Lord.
Because he got so much flack for the song about him loving browning. And I tell you, the people ripped into him until he had to come with this other song talking about black woman. And I'm telling you, because it was... But a lot of people, talk about the browning, the browning is a beautiful one, and you have nice hair and, your hair is long and it's nice and, and your skin is pretty, so like dark-skinned black people like me, we're never seen as pretty, never.
I think colorism definitely needs more conversation, and it's not a conversation that people are having very much at the moment, in the UK. I think it's starting to, but colorism over this side, or, saying shadism, I didn't even know the term shadism till you've just said it. It's nothing I've ever heard before. But I know the feeling of it, but I just said I never knew there was really a word for it up until recently.
Yeah.
And
but
especially directed at
slavery as well.
Yeah, and it's directed at, like you said, it's directed at black women, and I was reading about how it's to do with like slave owners having children with black women and then bringing in the light-skinned slave children into the home because they were passable.
The house slave.
Yeah, that's it, house slave. And then, that's a house and field slave. And then also the house slaves started to get that feeling of sort of superiority.
Yeah.
And then shaming the darker skinned people because they felt like they were then part of that. And that then feeds into the whole colonialism and still carries on now.
Yeah.
And then again, what I've been asking, some other people as well is like, it's talking about as a black woman, do you feel like fetishized and hypersexualized? I mean, I don't know if you've had that experience yourself. And I'm sure you've read about it, but have you had that experience yourself?
Yeah.
In what way have you experienced that?
No, I haven't experienced that. I mean, I never thought I was attractive in the first place, much more to think I was hypersexualized because of the whole thing that you never thought you were attractive because of you were so dark, you have, as they call it, nappy hair sort of thing.
Nappy hair, yes.
The nappy hair and, your dark skin. So I never thought of myself as any kind of sexual being at all. So I think you hear men saying, oh, you have these myths about once you try black, you never go back and all this sort of nonsense. And, that, black women, they want to try a black woman. And, I've never had anybody saying that to me, but maybe they think it, but I don't know. I've never explicitly had this, but I know that said, and when you look at representations, because I do a lot of work in terms of representation, images, when you look at pictures and images of black women, it's often quite in this kind of sexualized way. I did a book chapter about how black women were represented in a particular feminist magazine. And a lot of them were sort of represented in this kind of, and they say, you're this kind of person that looks like the mammy, the big fat woman. Hello?
Oh, sorry, you're here. Yeah, sorry, it just went dead for a second. Sorry, I heard you say the mammy. Yeah. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so the black woman is like the mammy. One representation is the black woman as a mammy. You know what the mammy is?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I've talked about this before with like Laura, even, Tom and Jerry. The cartoon Tom and Jerry, where you clearly know that the one saying like Thomas, like hitting, she is a black mammy figure. People used to think it was she was.
They never used to show the faces.
Of course they didn't, but we knew,
but not the faces. Yeah,
exactly. But people don't even realize that it is that mammy character. They think, oh, it's just Tom's like mum, I guess, like the mother of the house. But actually, you realise she's a housemaid. She's a black housemaid. It's a stereotype, but I don't think people, probably white people in particular, were never really aware of that. Like as we got older, but I was very aware of that. And it is that, like you said, it's that mammy figure, or as you were probably going to say, it's that sexualized.
The Jezebel, or this kind of figure. Yeah. This is how they're represented, black women. But the point about black women is that they're never represented as cerebral, as being intelligent. It's always about, and I think sometimes with black men as well, that it's always, and I think it was when you look at the decolonial literature, it's like black people are seen as having culture but no intellect.
That's so right.
They're not seen as intellectual. Yeah, they're not seen as intellectual. They're seen as being singers, musicians, sports people, cultural people, but not really seen as being intellectual. So I think that is the whole way that black people are represented. So if you see a black man or a black woman, especially a black woman who is very intellectual, it's like people don't know how to deal with it.
Do you feel that
they don't know how to deal with you? I think so, that people don't know how to deal with me, for instance. At every single university that I've been at, I feel that people just don't understand how to deal with me, other people, because they just don't know, they just can't place me in anything. So
they can't put you in that box that they've created.
Yeah.
Do you think that like BAME women's voices are left out of conversations? In terms of, even down to Black Lives Matter, do you feel like we've been left, or is that something that you've noticed?
I don't know in the UK, but remember that it was 3 black women who started Black Lives Matter in the States.
But you would never know that really, though, until you look into it.
Yeah. So it was the 3 black women who started it. But even when remember the whole furor that came up with the Me Too movement, because the woman who started it was a black woman, and then it was only when Alyssa, the actress?
Alyssa. What's her name? No, it wasn't Alyssa. It was the other one.
You know who I'm talking about anyway. It wasn't until that white actress sort of said it that it became this big thing. And, people kind of forgot that it was a black woman who started the Me Too thing. But because it was this white female actress woman who picked it up, and she claims that she didn't know about the black woman one, right? She claims that she didn't know about it. And as soon as people told her, she corrected it. She said, kudos to the black woman whose name I've forgotten. I can't remember anything right now. But, so I think black women, and, that's the whole issue with black feminism, that black women are silenced in the feminist movement, and they're silenced in the racism, in anti-racism movement. Because when you think about anti-racism, you think about black men. And when you think about feminism, you think about white women. So black women are in this kind of nowhere space. They're not seeing in the discussions about racism, and they're not seeing in discussions about feminism. because white women have taken over feminism and black men have taken over racism. So it's like the black women are in this gap where nobody cares.
Someone said to me in interviews I've been doing that, which I keep repeating to people, that we're at like the bottom of the food chain. And I was explaining to that person that I feel like we are so at the bottom where we've become completely invisible aside from the features that we have. So, you know, our breasts, our buttocks, our lips, but bits of us are taken out, but we're completely left out of the conversation. You know, we've just become like commodities, bits that they can take away from us. But it's almost like we're not seen. You know, I often feel like I'm completely invisible. Walking down the street, I feel, you know, someone might stare at me a bit, but I feel like I'm completely invisible. You know, someone might walk in front of me in a queue, or even when I'm in a car, I just feel invisible.
Yeah, I've had the queue jumping before. I've had people like, didn't you see me? Didn't you see me standing here?
I know, and I said this to me, can you not see me? Can you not see me? Actually, but I don't think they actually see us. I think we are invisible.
No. Yeah, they don't see.
And that's what I find. I think I actually find that the most upsetting out of everything. You know, we try so hard. You know, you're a professor. You've worked so hard to get to where you are, and you still are belittled and asked if you're a student. Yeah. You know, and you get to this age, and you get to this. You've reached pretty much. You know, you've reached the heights that people would dream of, and yet you still aren't taken seriously. It's like, what do we actually have to do? Yeah. But what they want us to do is to get our breasts out and dance about.
Be cultural.
Be cultural, be sexy, have our braids, have our box braids, and dance around in bikinis. And but if you're fat or if you're too dark skinned, you don't exist. Have you been asked about Black Lives Matter? And if so, like, how did that make you feel? Like, were you ever asked to talk about it from the prospect of, you know, being black? And because I was asked quite a few times, in the end I had to start saying no because my time was taken up. Did you find that?
Yes, I did. Yeah, because I wrote that piece for the I wrote a piece on it for that was sent out, kind of like a press release, and then from that I just kept getting calls about, do you want to talk on this program? Do you want to do this video? Do you want to do this? And I got tired myself until eventually somebody asked me, do you want to do a video? And I said no. I said, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I just can't do any more. So yeah, I did. I got asked about it pretty often. Yeah.
I'm still getting asked up until today.
Yeah, it's kind of eased off now. It's eased off with me now, but I just think, yeah, it's like everybody wanted suddenly, everybody wanted to know your opinion.
Last year, I wasn't getting asked about, with Sister Shack, I was getting asked a couple of things, but I was barely asked anything. And now suddenly, Black-led organisation, who I've always been pretty vocal, but I was ignored. The vocal was ignored until Black Lives Matter blew up. And then it was kind of like, oh, can we just talk to you for a minute? Can we have your free time? You know, I'll do it for my black community. That's absolutely fine. I will happily do that. But I want to be paid if I'm doing it from the white gaze.
Yeah, everybody was suddenly interested in what we thought. We hadn't been seen before, but suddenly, oh, yeah, there's a black professor in Sunderland. Let's talk to her.
one of the fewer than 1%.
But I'm the only black woman professor in Sunderland. I understand I'm the first one.
You're the first one?
First one, yeah. The first black woman professor in Sunderland.
You're not?
I am, yeah.
Wow.
And I got made a professor in 2016. So
oh my gosh.
I'm the first one. Yeah. I don't think I think there's another professor who is from Egypt. A woman who is from Egypt. Don't know if she thinks of herself as black. Maybe, I don't know. I have actually never spoken to her about whether she thinks of herself as black or she thinks of herself as Arabic. You know, because a lot of North Africans think of themselves more as Arabic rather than necessarily black. So I've never actually spoken to her about that.
My God, that's really intense.
But I'm the only black woman there as a professor. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That actually really surprises me.
There isn't even a black man professor either. There's no black man in that's a professor.
Jeez, I suppose, if you go down south, there'd be a lot more. But yeah, up in the northeast, you're grabbing, clutching at straws to find any. What barriers do you think that society sort of needs to address and tip over in terms of, like, the black experience?
I think a lot of it is about education, and also, even though this is allegedly a multicultural society, people don't mix with each other. You have the Asian community there, you have the Chinese community there, you have the, sort of Black African community there. You have people not really mixing with each other in kind of social settings a lot. And I think that also leads to stereotyping, misunderstandings. And I think education is really, really important. A lot of people don't know the history. They don't know about other cultures because they don't mix. They don't want to learn about it. And I think that education is really important. And I'm not saying that because I am in education, but I think that that's really important in order to break down these stereotypes that people have and this kind of, lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of other cultures and other people. So I think that that's a big step that needs to be taken. I was quite shocked when I came here that people weren't learning about the colonial history in schools.
Yeah, I mean, colonialism is something that I haven't known much about. I mean, I know about, like, my history of, like, the Caribbean and the slaves and being brought over from Africa to these Caribbean islands and pushing away all the indigenous people to make way for Black Africans. But yeah, I've not really ever known it in such detail up until the last few years and there's still so much more for me to learn.
Yeah, but I think as I keep saying that, there are so many silences in education system. In Jamaica, in terms of education, I'm not talking about when you go to university, because when you go to university, you can choose to do whatever. But the sort of compulsory pre-16 or pre-18 education, I think there is a silence around Africa prior to slavery and colonialism.
Yes.
So we don't really know a lot about African kingdoms and what was going on in Africa before colonialism and before slavery, right? Because it's like our Caribbean history starts with the slavery, with the Middle Passage. Mm-hmm. And we learn a lot about that. But what was happening in Africa before that, we didn't learn a lot about that. In the UK, they don't learn a lot about colonialism and that sort of thing. And in Africa, they don't learn a lot about slave trade. Mm-hmm. So it's like there are these silences that are happening in the three, in that triangle, right? Definitely. So the UK, they don't learn a lot about colonialism or even about Africa before the Africans. Africans don't learn a lot about slavery. And then the Caribbean people don't learn a lot about what was happening in Africa before slavery. So there are all of these silences in these connected histories, which is quite interesting to me, that there are these gaps and silences.
Oh, sorry. I'm interested as well in, the indigenous people that existed in the West Indies before Caribbean, before people were brought from Africa.
Those. We learned about those at school, like the Arawaks and the Caribs and, yeah.
And that's it. In the UK, we don't learn any of that. It's almost to think that you think Black Caribbean people were born there, but we weren't Caribbean. We were from Africa.
Yeah,
different parts of Africa, and we're almost like removed. And it's like, I'm Caribbean, I'm African, but our bloodline is Africa.
But a lot of people in the Caribbean would get upset if you told them that they were African.
Yeah, they do.
Because it's a shame. It's a shame, They feel ashamed.
But it's not that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. It was a couple of hundred years ago.
To say that they are African because of the whole way that Africa is portrayed, It's always about either starvation, corruption, war. There are no success stories that people see from Africa. So when some Jamaicans, you tell them that they're Africans, they get upset. Me not come from Africa.
Like, well, you did probably a couple of hundred years ago. You definitely did. You're probably only like 3 or 4 generations Caribbean.
It's only the Rastafarians that were pushing the Africa story. The Rastafarians were instrumental in this kind of Black consciousness. Marcus Garvey, Rastafari, all of those were instrumental in bringing across the sort of African heritage. And I think that was where people started to get more interested in Africa. And not everybody, but, because Rastafarians were vilified when they just came up, seen as dirty, nasty, good for nothing. They were vilified in Jamaica, Rastafarians.
goes to show you how long that policeman had his knee on George Floyd's neck. That gives you an idea of the length of time. No wonder the man's life was drained out of his body, despite him crying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. You know, it was just...
What 3 words would you use to describe what it is to be a black woman? Or in your experience, what it is to be a black woman?
Wow. I would say strong. You see, I'm going back now to Maya Angelou, which is Everybody Loves Maya Angelou, right?
Yes,
and everybody loves the Still I Rise poem. And I just always think of myself as this kind of black woman who is strong, powerful, beautiful. You know, I'm not talking about beautiful physically necessarily.
Oh, yes.
You know, I think, that's how I feel as a black woman, all positive. Okay. I don't have any negative words to say about being a black woman. That's how I feel. Now, how other people see me is a different thing.
Of course.
And how other people treat me, it's different. But I would say very strong, beautiful, powerful. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the second episode of the Outsider Sisters podcast. Much thanks to Donna Chambers for her time and insight. For more information about Donna and this series, please refer to the podcast show notes. Until the next time, thank you for listening to Outsider Sisters, hosted by Chantal Herbert.